Shalom Aleichem, Mishpachim. All right. I believe I am going to continue my readings in Leviticus. We are in the Parsha of Leviticus, the first portion of the book of Leviticus. And we are in the fifth reading of the Parsha. So let us begin. The fifth reading, Parsha Vayikra. Right here, chapter 4, verse 1. I don't know when it ends, but this will tell me where to stop. So, all right. Chapter 4, verse 1. God spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the Israelites, saying, if a person unintentionally transgresses any of the passive commandments of God, committing part of one of them, if the anointed priest commits the same sin that implicates the supreme court of the people, he must bring for his sin that he has committed an unblemished young bull as a sin offering to God." Verse 2. Verse 3, verse 2. Rashi. Any of the passive commandments of... So this is Rashi I'm going to be reading from. And, all right, verse 2. Any of the passive commandments of God. Our rabbis explained that a sin offering is only brought for an act that, if committed intentionally, involves transgressing a passive commandment and the penalty of excision. If someone committed such an act unintentionally, he must bring a sin offering. Part of one of them. The prefix mem of this word indicates even part of one of them. For example, one who writes on the Sabbath the two letters shin and mem from the word, and I don't know that word, the two letters, okay, this is that I cannot read. Verse 3. Rashi. Literally, if the anointed priest sins to the guilt of the people. The Midrashic explanation is, he is only liable for a sin offering in a case of an eluded matter, an erroneous ruling, along with the resultant unintentional act, as it says regarding the guilt of the people. A matter eluded the eyes of the community and the people transgress. However, its straightforward meaning is, according to the Aggadic explanation, when the high priest sins, it reinforces the guilt of the people, since they rely on him to atone for them and to pray for them, and he lacks this ability now that he has become tainted by sin. Bull. I might think that this means even an old one. Scripture therefore states here, a young one. If it means a young one, I might think that even a very young one is suitable. Scripture therefore states a bull. How is this reconciled? It means a bull in its third year. Verse 4. Torah. He must bring the bull to the entrance of the tent of meeting before God. He must lean his hand upon the bull's head and slaughter the bull before God. The anointed priest must take some of the bull's blood and bring it into the tent of meeting. The priest must dip his finger into the blood and dash some of the blood 7 times before God toward the holy part of the curtain. Verse 5. Rashi, into the tent of meeting, into the tabernacle, and subsequently, upon construction of the permanent temple, into the temple building. Verse 6, Rashi, toward the literally holy curtain, in front of its most holy point, directly in front of the space between the poles of the ark. The blood was not aimed so far as to touch the curtain, but if it did touch, so be it. Verse 7, Torah, the priest must place some of the blood on the protrusions of the incense altar, which is inside the tent of meeting in front of God. He must pour all the rest of the bull's blood onto the base of the altar used for scent offerings, onto the side that faces the entrance of the tent of meeting. Verse 7. Rashi, all the bull's blood, the rest of its blood. Verse 8. And this is Torah. He must remove all the sin offering bull's fat from it, the fat covering the innards, all the fat that is on the innards, the 2 kidneys, the fat that is on them, and that is on the flanks. He must remove the diaphragm along with the kidneys, along with the part of the liver. Verse 8. Rashi, all the sin offering bull's fat. It should have just said, it's fat. Why does Scripture state the extra word? It is added to include the bull on Yom Kippur, in the requirement to burn up the kidneys, the fats, and the diaphragm. The sin offering, this word is added to include the goat sin offerings brought to atone for idolatry in the requirement to burn up the kidneys, the fats, and the diaphragm. He must remove from the animal when it is still in an attached state. He should not cut it to pieces before its fat is removed. Verse 10. Torah, just as with the fat parts that are removed from the work bull sacrificed as a peace promoting feast offering, the priest must burn them up on the altar used for scent offerings. Regarding the bull's hide, all of its flesh, its head, its legs, its innards, and its waste matter, he must take the entire bull to a ritually undefiled place outside the camp, to the ash depository, and he must burn it up in the fire on the wood. It must be burned up in the ash depository. Verse 10, Rashi, literally, just as is removed. Those designated parts that are specified regarding the bull brought as a peace offering. But what is specified there regarding the peace offering that is not specified here too? The purpose of these words is only to compare this offering to the peace offering as follows. Just as a peace offering must be brought with intent that it be this particular offering, so too this offering must be brought with intent. And just as a peace offering particularly brings peace to the world, so too this offering particularly brings peace to the world. And in Shechitat Chodashim, Tractate Zevachim, this verse is required to derive from it the rule that regarding sacrifices, one cannot deduce another law from something that itself is deduced from elsewhere, as explained in chapter Etzehu Mekoman. Literally on the liver, on the kidneys, and on its head, on its legs. In all these cases, denotes addition equivalent to the term besides. Verse 12. Verse 11. Well, I read that already. Verse 12. Rashi, to a ritually undefiled place, since there are places outside the city set aside for ritually defiled items, to cast stones affected by tsaras, and for a cemetery. It was necessary to state that this, outside the camp, which is outside the town, must be an undefiled place. Outside the camp, outside the 3 camps surrounding the tabernacle. And when the sacrifice was offered in the permanent temple, it would be taken outside the city, as our sages explain in Tractate Yoma and Tractate Sanhedrin, is the place where the ashes that are removed from the altar are deposited. As it says, and he must take the ashes outside the camp. It must be burned up in the ash depository. It only needed to mention this in order to teach us that it is burned in that place, even if there is no ashes there. Verse 13, Torah. If the Supreme Court of the entire community of Israel errs because a matter eluded the eyes of the community, and the people transgress any of the passive commandments of God, thereby incurring guilt, when the sin that they had committed is discovered, the community must bring a young bull as a sin offering. They must bring it before the tent of meeting. Verse 13, Rashi, the community of Israel. This refers to the Sanhedrin, a matter eluded. They erred in issuing a ruling that one of the acts punishable by excision mentioned in the Torah is permitted. Literally, the community, and they do. The community acted relying on the ruling. All right, verse 15. Verse 14, 15. Torah 15. The elders of the community must lean their hands upon the bull's head before God, and one of them, of the representatives, must slaughter the bull before God. The anointed priest must bring some of the bull's blood into the tent of meeting. The priest must dip his finger into the blood and dash it 7 times before God toward the curtain. He must place some of the blood on the protrusions of the altar that is in the tent of meeting, in front of God. He must pour all the rest of the blood onto the base of the altar used for scent offerings, onto the side that faces the entrance to the tent of meeting. Verse 17, Rashi, toward the curtain, above. However, it says, toward the holy curtain. The difference can be explained by means of a parable of a king whom a province offended. If only a minority of it offended, his royal house remains intact. But if the entire province offended, his royal house is no longer intact. Here too, when only the anointed high priest has sinned, the temple is still referred to as holy. But when everyone has sinned, God forbid, the holiness departs. Verse 18, Rashi, literally, the base of the altar used for scent offerings that is at the entrance of the tent of meeting. This refers to the west side of the base, the one facing the entrance. Verse 19, Torah. He must separate all its fat from it and burn it up on the altar. He must do to the bull just as he would do to the sin offering bull. He must do this to it in order for the priest to atone for them, so they may be forgiven. He must take the bull outside the camp and burn it just as he would burn the first bull. For this is a sin offering like that one, but for the entire community. (19) Rashi. He must separate all its fat. Although here it does not specify the diaphragm and the two kidneys as it does elsewhere, they are inferred from the next verse. He must do to the bull just as he would do to the sin offering bull. And why are they not stated here explicitly? It was taught in the school of Rabbi Yishmael. About this may be given a parable of a king who was angry with his favorite subject, but spoke only briefly of his offense because of the affection he had for him. Verse 20, Rashi. He must do to the bull, this one, just as he would do to the sin offering bull, as stated explicitly regarding the bull of the anointed priest. This phrase is added to include the diaphragm and the two kidneys among the burned portions, as they are specified there but not here, and also to repeat the instructions for these services, to teach us that if one of the blood applications is omitted, the offering is invalidated. Since we find regarding the blood applied to the outer altar that if only one application was done, it nevertheless achieves atonement, it was necessary to say here that each application of the blood is essential for the validity of the offering. Verse 22, Torah. If a leader sins by unintentionally transgressing any of the passive commandments of God, his God, incurring guilt, if the sin that he committed is made known to him, he must bring his offering, an unblemished male goat. Verse 22, if a leader sins, the term here is related to praises. Praised is the generation who sees that its leader takes care to achieve atonement for his unintentional sin, from which it may be inferred a fortiori that he regrets his intentional sins, for they will be thus also inspired to guard themselves from sin. Verse 23, Rashi. This is the equivalent of if is made known. This is a grammatical work. Is made known to him. When he sinned, he imagined the act to be permissible, but afterwards it became known to him that it was forbidden. Verse 24, Torah. He must lean his hand upon the goat's head and slaughter it in the place where he slaughters the scent offerings before God as a sin offering. The priest must take some of the blood of the sin offering with his finger and place it on the four protrusions of the altar used for scent offerings. He must pour the rest of its blood onto the base of the altar used for scent offerings. He must burn up all its fat on the altar, just like the fat of the peace promoting feast offerings. Thus the priest makes atonement for his sin so that he may be forgiven. Verse 24, Rashi, in the place where he slaughters the scent offerings, on the north side of the altar, which is specified regarding the scent offering. Literally, it is a sin offering. This teaches that if it was slaughtered with proper intent, that it be a sin offering, it is valid. But if it was slaughtered with a different intent, for another type of offering, it is invalid. Verse 25, Rashi, it's blood, the rest of the blood. Verse 26, Rashi, like the fat of the peace-promoting feast offering, like those designated parts that are enumerated explicitly regarding the goat mentioned among the peace offerings. All right. And that is the 5th Aliyah